Hello, welcome to the MA Open Evening here online from the University of London Institute in Paris. This evening, we would like to welcome you to a presentation of the MA in Urban History and Culture. And I'm joined by some really lovely people that I would like, first of all, to introduce you to. So we have on the screen here with me, Leon Hughes, who's a current student and here as a student ambassador. And he'll be speaking a little bit later. And Jenny Lee Dolder, who's also a student ambassador. And they'll be telling you a little bit about where they come from and why they joined the program. You also have on the screen in the middle, certainly in my representation of it, we have Claire Miller, who is Head of Student and Academic Services. And I think some of you will already have been in contact with Claire if you've inquired about making an application, or perhaps you've actually already made your application. So you'll know that Claire is one of the key kind of sources of information for all sorts of things. And she'll be talking a little bit, or certainly answering some of the questions you might have about entry procedures, about housing, about admissions, about visas, and so on and so forth. So we'll get to some of those practicalities a little bit later. And we also have Rebecca Pouget with us, and Rebecca is in charge of communications. And I'd like to extend a really big thank you to Rebecca for organizing this. So the aim of this evening is to give you a feel for the MA Urban History and Culture at the University of London Institute in Paris, which we deliver in partnership with Queen Mary, University of London. So I'm going to start by giving you a feel for what the Institute is, for where I'm speaking from, because I am actually speaking from the University of London Institute in Paris, on the Rue de Constantine, in the 7th arrondissement, on a kind of grey evening that's threatening rain, although it was actually extraordinarily beautiful earlier. So I'm going to start by showing you some pictures and talk you through that a little bit. And then we'll move to some presentation of the actual program. And then the student ambassadors will give you their perspectives on the program. And then we'll move at the end towards a Q&A. So we'd like to invite you at any point in time to start entering questions that you have about the Institute, about the facilities at the Institute, about the program itself, or potentially about some of the more practical dimensions of moving to Paris to study for an MA. So you can at any point in time enter your questions into the chat function, and we'll pick them up and moderate them and answer either by writing or orally in the second half of this evening's event. Okay, so first of all, the Institute. I'm coming back to my slides, and here is the Institute as it was at one point today, although I'm not going to suggest that this photo was taken today, but a beautiful building, beautifully exposed to the sunlight that we get on the Esplanade des Invalides, right in the centre of town. And the Institute is one of the leading UK institutes in continental Europe. It's a very historic institute, in fact. It's existed for over 100 years. And has for a number of decades been a member of the central academic body of the University of London, which itself is one of the most diverse universities in the UK. And we here at the Institute work in particular with Queen Mary, University of London, and particularly in the delivery of graduate programs. So I'll say a little bit more about that as I go forward. All the students from our programs graduate with a University of London degree, and they have access to the vast range of resources, both in Paris and in London, libraries, support services, electronic resources, and it really is an incredibly rich selection of resources, as well, of course, as being able to access the resources that Paris has to offer, university libraries, the National Library in Paris, various archives, city libraries as well. And we work hard to make sure that students understand their course of study, both in relation to the location in Paris, but also to the breadth of possibility that the University of London offers. A little bit more about Paris, though, first of all. So you can see here that we are situated down here in this little red blob to the right of the screen. So that shows you on this map here the Esplanade des Invalides. And perhaps I'm not sure if you can see my cursor moving there, but that large green area is what is directly out in front of my windows, which look onto the Eiffel Tower itself. We're within walking distance of numerous monuments, museums, and also of the Seine, which you perhaps see a little bit better if I show you this representation of our location in central Paris. And one of the really wonderful things about Paris, and arguably one of a sort of question that we might have very directly in the program, is the way in which the river has shaped urban experience and shaped the city. And today, I think, in terms of like trying to articulate the historic connections with the lived experience of city culture today, I think one of the great resources of the city is the river as a space where we can kind of both be in the centre and away from the cut and thrust of traffic, of people, of shops, of the busyness of the street. And it's really a kind of wonderful privilege to come to the Institute, to cross the bridges, to cycle along the edge of the river. And it's a great joy to be both in that kind of very historic and ancient element of the city, and at the same time so connected to some of the modernity of the city. So I think the location itself is a really significant feature of what we're trying to do with this program. We're a very small university, and that has a lot of advantages. We have roughly 200 students at any point in time working with us. You'll never be lost in the crowd at ULIP. And thanks to our size, I think we're able to really generate a very interesting interdisciplinary environment. There are 3 graduate programs that work from within the Institute: our MA Urban History and Culture, the MA in International Relations, which is taught directly by Queen Mary, University of London, and the LLM, which is a law program. Okay, so why did we create the MA in Urban History and Culture? Well, we created this program at what I think is a really important kind of crossroads, and particularly in Parisian history, but more generally, I think, in the future of cities and how we think about cities. We ourselves were inspired by the challenges that the city confronted in the wake of the 2015 attacks, in the context of the urgency of climate change, and then also with the kind of the positive, if you like, or forward-looking prospects of events such as the Olympic Games, but also of the massive infrastructural possibilities that the city is dealing with, is adapting to, as the nature of work changes, as the nature of transport changes. And of course, today, we're also aware that the current pandemic has also, I think, radically altered both our expectations of city living and our sense of what challenges that confronts us with. It's a very unique program, working at the intersection between the political and social histories of cities, of how the built environment has changed, and how the interaction between the built environment and social history has shaped the transformation, let's say, of the urban space. Our MA offers you the chance to study from within the city, very directly from within the city. And in that sense, what I'm doing this evening is a slightly paradoxical or contradictory exercise, or what we're engaged in here, as we are kind of working through an online platform. But I think one of the objectives that we have for this evening is really to give you a feeling for how, nonetheless, our work is absolutely anchored in empirical experience, in day-to-day lived experience of the city, and that even in the context of the restrictions that the pandemic has imposed upon us. It's a unique program as well, in as much as it offers you the opportunity to work between 2 of the major global cities, between Paris and London. All of semester 1 is spent in Paris with, in usual contexts, in usual circumstances, a field trip that we all do together to London towards the end of the first term. But all of the delivery of the courses done in Paris, and all students convene together in Paris, and faculty travels from London to join us in Paris and deliver their courses here on site in the Institute. And then in the second semester, some students stay on in Paris and study a series of research-led options that we offer here. And some students have the possibility of opting to go to London and study for courses offered at Mile End at the Queen Mary campus. You don't have to make a decision about whether you want to relocate to London for the second semester until, partway through the first semester. So there's no need to know that for sure in advance, but that is certainly I think a really interesting option for you. Some of the questions that you'll study, and I'm going to move a little bit more swiftly through this. I hope you can see some of the range of things, from questions that might relate to specific forms of architecture to questions that are anchored more, for example, in art practice, to the creation of new infrastructure such as the garden and how that might intersect with changing cultural history. There's a garden in the center of Paris that's named after Nelson Mandela, and I think that says both a lot about the changing priorities of the city, but also the ways in which the city is choosing to articulate its relationship to international history, to transnational history, to racial history. So these are some of the kind of quite interestingly articulated or angled ways in which we try to work from within the city towards a vast range of different concerns and considerations today. There are 2 core modules, so all students who come from often very varied backgrounds, and I'm going to hand over now to the student ambassadors who will give you a sense of their own backgrounds. So there's often a big variety of different disciplinary trainings that gather together for these 2 core modules, Encountering the City and Imagining the City, which are both team taught in the first term. And these give you a very good breadth, I think, of both history and culture. And they are very importantly articulated around site visit work. So I'm going to hand over at this point to Leon, first of all to Jenny Lee, to give you a sense of the work that you did for your site visit work, Jenny Lee.
For the site visit, I chose the Aqueduct of Louveciennes, which has been included in the organization of surrounding space. More than a year ago, I had several discussions with the directorial staff of the museum I know quite well, where I offered information to potentially update the title and amend the location of their Sicily painting, which is the one next to my title there. The aqueduct happens to be in my back garden, and they asked if I could send current pictures and historical notes to be included in the paintings file. So this was my first time writing in a while, as I'm a non-traditional student. So I chose to be inspired by a location I knew well. In the process, I discovered various movements and purposes where the aqueduct was passively organizing the space after its decommissioning. It's also an iconic for numerous depictions by Impressionist painters. And then it was part of various military campaigns. And currently it's a structure used as a grid to organize local activities and village life. So that was the project I chose for the first site essay.
Okay, that's really great. Thanks so much, Jenny Lee. And I want Jenny Lee's going to have a chance to, as will Leon, to introduce herself a bit more, where she comes from. But we wanted to give you a flavour at this point in the presentation for the sort of work that was done. So this, just to kind of slightly reiterate that, this extraordinary piece of often forgotten architecture, I think, and infrastructure that was massively important in terms of the transformation of the experience of that part of the city, and that happens to be right next to where Jenny Lee lives, and which she uncovered this really rich history about it. So, and I was able to articulate all of these different forms of different ways in which that urban form has been captured over the centuries. Now, I think Leon's project was really quite different. So perhaps you'll say something about that, and it'll give people a feel for the variety in the program. So over to you, Leon.
So I was inspired by George Perec's exaltation of a place, Saint-Sulpice, which incidentally, I didn't mean to do this at the start of the course, but I lived next to. So Perec, here are some pictures. Mine are the top left and the bottom right. And he sat in the place and he tried to exhaust everything that was going on in the daily life. So I took this methodology, was inspired by it, and added it to my own interest in affect theory. So I sat in the place and I recorded everything that happened. Incidentally, I did it on the last day before the reconfinement here in November. Now, I'd love to say that was a strategic decision by me. It wasn't. I was pushed by the impending lockdown, but it meant that at the end of it, I had this log that was saturated with this impending closure of time, and I think it was quite productive. I definitely enjoyed it, and it was nothing I'd ever done before. So yeah, that was my site visit.
Okay, thanks so much. So you can see then, people listening, you can, I think, have a feel there for the ways in which there's the work that's being done, even from the very first term, is both really reactive to situations that students find themselves in. So reactive to where they happen to be living, to things that happen to be happening to them, whether are they coming from the outside, external events such as lockdown, and the constraints is that, working with those constraints to open up questions that are historical, but also experiential. So, and Leon referred to affect theory as a kind of a really, I think, important sort of set of questions that people ask today about the ways in which we interact with our environments, how they impact on our emotional experience of space, the ways in which we function in social relations, and essentially, how we, as we say in French, faire société. Okay, so we can see this range going from both infrastructure, opening up historical questions which relate today to heritage, through to social interactions and how those kind of touch us at the most intimate level. So it gives you, I think, some feel of the range of possibilities that we're excited about here at the University of London Institute in Paris. Now, if I go back to the presentation, that's all just in the first term, okay? Second term, a range of different things, a range of research-led courses where some of them relate to questions of grassroots insurgency, political change in the city, the questions of, we also have a course on the 19th century imaginary, which looks at Impressionist painting, the realist novel, the rise of photography. We have a course on climate policy, which is very much about the kind of contemporary policy-driven agenda, particularly of the major municipality or mayoral office in Paris. We're interested in theoretical concepts as well. There's a course on the concept of centrality, which is very informed by some urban philosophers. So, a set of possibilities where both faculty and students get to hone their interests around some really, I think, important and cutting edge questions. And then, of course, there's the dissertation. Now, the dissertation is a key component in the overall assessment of the program. It's one of the main components of your final result. But it's also, and much more importantly, I think, than that, the opportunity to really start doing original research. And we definitely conceive and support you in support the process of you developing a project that is very much specific to you, that reflects where you came from and how you came to the questions that you have about the city, and that gives you a kind of a springboard towards the work that you want to do in the world, whether that be in the context of further research, for public agencies, for consultancy companies, within the university environment, whether it be within the museum environment, within journalism, within tourism-related sort of employment, a range of the sorts of things that people have gone on to do, and of course teaching as well, and communications work. The dissertation, we like to think of it as really the opportunity for you to kind of like to engage with a question that you're passionate about, and to do that in a structured way, and to produce a piece of work that you are really proud of as a reflection of you and a reflection of the year or potentially 2 years that you spent in Paris. Now, you can see on the bottom of the screen there a few of the recent topics that people have worked on, and again, the incredible range that the program develops. And I'm very, I'm very pleased to be able to say that we generally have a very successful set of dissertations that are received by the external examiners of this program with incredible admiration for the work that students achieve within it. Now, slightly more quickly, where will this take you? Well, I've said a little bit of the sorts of things that I think it takes you on to. You can see at the bottom of the slide here some of the professions on beyond this MA that previous graduates have gone on to work in. I think it's also really important to stress that the university offers a really fabulous kind of support through the careers group, and that's a resource that you can call on beyond graduation. I think you graduate from this program with a postgraduate qualification from one of a major international university, and also with really strong intercultural skills and a range of kind of project management, observational skills that we really work hard to underpin through both individual support and methodology classes as well. The Institute is characterized by a very, I think, enthusiastic, if not passionate, definitely passionate, We work across a range of questions: historical, policy-driven, international politics, mobilities, visual culture, language cultures, multilingualism, translation studies. These are some of the questions that we are interested in, and I'm joined in the faculty with a number of relatively young academics who are publishing in all sorts of interesting environments and producing work that's being presented in conferences around the world, although at the moment obviously largely via Zoom. We have a range of different events that are taking place, and in fact I'd like to draw your attention to the fact, if you go on to the website, and I think perhaps my colleague Rebecca will post in the chat the link for a really interesting event that we have on measurements in the city and how the measuring of data is conditioning city life today, which is taking place this coming Monday at 6:30 in Paris time. So Monday, the 15th of March, you have this conversation about mapping and measurement, which will be bringing a range of different speakers from a range of urban environments to think about how the mapping process conditions the way we live urban experience. Normally obviously our events take place on site in the main conference room in the Institute, and they're a really good opportunity to meet speakers, to spend time slightly more informally with faculty, and we place a great premium on that proximity that we have with the students studying in this program. At the moment, obviously, we're functioning more by Zoom and Teams and so on, these sorts of platforms. But I think even so, and again, this is something that perhaps the student ambassadors will share, I think even in this context, we've managed to continue to keep a kind of lived, vibrant, physically located experience through this program. And we are very committed to that type of interaction at the Institute. Moving quickly on, you can see again the building here, which we share with the British Council. Its proximity to the Invalides, as I said. You can see that within it, one of the things that I think is really important in terms of the proximity that we try to generate also within the building, which is that we have a very nicely appointed and well-resourced library that sits right in the middle of our activities on the first floor, just next to some of the classrooms, and really serves, I think, as a space, a hub of the Institute life where people run into one another, exchange ideas about what they're reading, hang out. So it's a very lived, embodied space, and I think it's really important for the sort of environment, learning and researching environment that we foster here. We also have social space, student social space, and which in normal conditions is a really important hub for communal life, communal intellectual life. You can see some of the facilities that you have access to on the bottom of the screen. And as I move quickly on, we also have, and I think that's another really important characteristic of the work we do here, a really dedicated and active and reactive student services office, where, whether your questions range from issues to do with housing, to visas, to accessing bank accounts, to accessing doctors, the whole range of these kind of life considerations that you might have are questions that you can bring to that support office. So, you find yourself, I think, very easily in direct contact with both academic faculty, the library staff who can assist you in finding the right resources, and support staff who can answer any questions you have and help you resolve some problems that you might encounter. So on that, I think it's about time, you can see student life, for me to hand over to a more vocal version of student life. So I'm going to switch back to the camera and call on Jenny Lee to give us some idea about how you came to the program, what your pathway was to this program, and how you're finding it. And then we'll speak to Leon as well. Before we do that, I just want to remind everybody who's listening, please do enter your questions into the chat, and we'll get to those shortly. So over to you, Jenny Lee.
Well, the way I found this program was when I was a child, I wrote a list of accomplishments I wanted to achieve. And that's kind of been my compass in life. So some of these objectives are probably similar to things that you would be interested in a program like this, such as living abroad for a year, learning another language through immersion, because I'm a hands-on learner. So I had a difficult time learning a foreign language in the classroom. I always wanted to study at least one term at a UK university and complete at least a master's degree in my education. So ULIP encompasses the potential to achieve all of these goals, while also encouraging a profound growth academically and culturally in this setting. When I was in the process of researching different UK universities to potentially explore a master's degree, as a passion project in history, my partner actually is the one who discovered this program and strongly encouraged me to apply. What was so interesting and dynamic about this particular program was how niche it was. And I remember talking with Anna-Louise in our interview, and that was my question, was how did you come up with a program like this that's so specific but diverse at the same time? It's incredible to be able to study Paris while in Paris, and then also be able to study London from experts who are in London. There's a myriad of traditional and non-traditional students in this program. So I personally am a non-traditional student. I spent 7 years working at a U.S. state institution, university, in various research roles. And then after that, I've spent the last decade world schooling my children. And so I'm coming back to school after quite a large break. And as someone who's naturally interested in history and culture, I discovered as much of this region as I could on my own, because I actually relocated to Paris to learn French and to make sure my kids could learn French. So I was here 3 years before I applied for the program at ULIP. And I really was missing that academic base to take my explorations from a tourist to, someone who felt confident and competent in this region. So I was really hoping when I applied to be exposed to different perspectives other than my constant own point of view of always going to a biography. And from my educational background, I really had a missing base of literature information. So I was hoping to kind of become a more dynamic and well-rounded individual by adding that into it. And I tell you, after I'm done with this program, I will never be able to say I have no literature background ever again in my life. I've read more than you could ever hope to read, but the best quality material presented. So the program has exposed me to so many new topics, and it challenges you to discover a multifaceted array of things that you wouldn't necessarily come to on your own, because it covers from architecture to literature to art, war history, ancient history. It covers, the entire history of Paris, all the way to the more recent cultural movements that have been going on, even the latest protests we had a course on. So you really walk away feeling like Paris, the development of this area. So throughout the classes, different curiosities are always highlighted, and it brings you to an awareness of a state of mind where you pass by a certain stone wall and you now know that it has this profound meaning that you would have never attributed to it. Or you walk into a room that has new meaning that you've just passed by a dozen times. Walking through the hallways of the Louvre, you never realize that that's where everything happened. So the teaching methods are immensely diversified, and the expert professors teach their specific subject for that class. So that's something I've never discovered before. The first semester, nearly every single class is taught by a different professor who is a specialist in that subject. So it's the most ultimate master's class set that you could ever hope for. And you can tell that in this program, the professors really enjoy teaching these classes. I almost walk away feeling like it could be the highlight of their teaching calendar, because they teach it with such a passion and detail that's motivating and inspirational. Whether you walk in really excited about that course or you walk in with no information, you walk out completely inspired to kind of dig a little bit deeper, which takes me to my what I've enjoyed so far in this program. So the exposure to new topics, and the pre-seminar prep I find extremely helpful, The reading lists are incredible. You have the information that really prepares you for that class, but then you also have a series of information if you walk away that you can go back through and dig deeper. And in that, all of the professors are very, very receptive to email, to communication, and very quick with response. So if you had a class that you walked away really curious about digging further, I've sent so many emails that just said, I have a little bit more information about a certain subject, or do you have a book list to recommend? And I've gotten feedback, within usually a couple days, actually. So in the research methods class, it gives you all of the tools that you need to succeed. You have field work, which is comparative field work. So you'll go to one museum and then a few weeks later go to another museum and then discuss how they've both developed their situations differently. There's a lot of flexibility with the facilities. Leon has a lot more experience with the facilities than I do. But in certain of these events, we're in person. Sometimes you have to be online. You do the site visits together. And then other times I've been able to tap in and tag along on Teams, walking around, still experiencing it while I'm looking everything up while Derive is going on. And the cohort is extremely tight-knit, which anytime you live abroad, you get this immediate fast friendship. So it's unique to that sense. And we all, some of us speak French, some have no French, some are traditional students, some are non-traditional students, but we all really work together and communicate effectively, efficiently, support each other. Any questions, they're answered. So that's kind of the main points I really wanted to bring up, but there's so many different theories in writing and sounding boards with each other. The library is incredible with a lot of original manuscripts. So you walk in and you're like, I'm allowed to touch that, I'm allowed to read this. I have permission. So they really provide everything you need, especially in this research methods class that is more of a lab. It's a non-credited course, but you have a course on how to utilize the library, how to work with the tech, how to add the citation software. Anything you need to be able to do your work is in that research methods class. So, Leon, what brought you to ULIP?
Well, I mean, I have had a very different trajectory than Jane Lee. So I graduated last year. If Jane Lee took the unorthodox approach, I probably took the orthodox approach, which is I graduated last year. So I finished my BA in history at Oxford. And I think that's why I came to ULIP. My BA in Oxford was the right decision when I was 17. But when I was 21, I was frustrated, I suppose is probably the right word. I found it quite constrictive. As I said about my site visit, I'm interested in affect, emotions, culture. These are things that I wasn't getting my teeth into quite as much as I wanted to in my history degree. So when I saw this course and when I was thinking about how I found this course, I've got no idea how I found this course. It just kind of popped into my digital space. But I saw it and I didn't apply for any other masters. I saw it and I thought, this is the one I want to do. And it was because when I was doing my undergraduate, I was getting involved in history of emotions, digital methodologies. I was trying to go outside of history, and the faculty just kept trying to pull me back in. Maybe I'm being a bit unfair to Oxford, but what drew me to this course is the huge diversity to it. So Anna-Louise is a specialist in comparative literature. I've never done any literature before, but as Jane Lee says, I've loved doing the literature. It's a totally different way of thinking. It's much more expansive than I'm used to, and I've loved that. However, there are other things, as Jane Lee said, the R&M class. We've looked at, there's different methodologies, different ways of approaching academia and history. In my case, I go away, I learn these methodologies, I have a look at this experimental stuff, and then I come back to history. And for me, that's an incredibly productive process. Yeah, it's that interdisciplinarity, I think. Interdisciplinarity. There's all these connections going across it in the city of Paris, and it's essentially, where do I want to situate myself in this matrix, essentially. So yeah, the GIS, literature, field work. I hadn't done these in my BA, but I wanted to do them, and coming to Paris and coming to the MA allowed me to do that. So that's kind of my trajectory here. What can I say about the course itself? The first thing I'd say is the fact that the facilities are incredible. Like it's a small building in Paris, and Paris as a city can feel quite isolated sometimes. And I go into ULIP every day. I've lived in 4 places in the last 6 months now, but my kind of central node, my north as it were, is the building. I go into the library every day. Kim, who's the librarian and IT support, is incredible. Claire is also incredible. The kind of support that you get in an academic sense, but also moving as a 21-year-old to a totally new country, every form's in French. I've got no idea what's going on. I'm not a native speaker. It was I felt supported when I came here, and I would put a huge asterisk next to that. The other thing I'd say is and we'll probably talk about this, but there's generous funding. That was something that drew me to the course. What else? Also, it's affiliated with Queen Mary. So when the word I think of when I think of this course is adaptability. So as I said, I've moved around the city. I went back to England for 2 months over the convenor, and I did all the classes online. So, I mean, I've talked to Anna-Louise about it, and I was moving obviously around, but there was an ability to do that with the course. The course is very adaptable to what's going on in the world, and also what's going on in your lives, I suppose. So yeah, that adaptability isn't just kind of in the more practical elements, though. It's also in the course itself. So I audit courses at Queen Mary, undergraduate courses that I have absolutely I shouldn't be in them. I'm going in through a back door, but I'm allowed to, and it's great. And it's incredibly exciting. The thing I'd finish with is that nothing's ever finished with the course, and it's incredibly open-ended. So we've now done four essays. So I've talked about one of them. I've talked about the first one. I'm still rewriting, I think, 3 of those essays. I'm still kind of going back to them. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a credit to Anna-Louise, I suppose, but also to just being in the city. So those pictures I showed you of Saint-Sulpice, I went and took those yesterday. So I'm still going back to the spaces. I'm still rethinking, reformulating the process that went on in that initial essay that I wrote 5 months ago now. So nothing's ever finished, and that's due to Anna-Louise, but it's also due to being in Paris. And yeah, that's my 2 cents in it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Leon. I'm going to just bounce off that and say that I think that, I feel very much the same way, and that's due to the students who joined the program. I think, and I know that's a feeling that my colleagues share as well. And Jenny Lee's absolutely right that we really value the intellectual experience of teaching in the MA. And I feel that we're constantly sort of looking to see how we can change the way we're asking the questions, manage the course, what readings to do, how to organize the visits, and the integration between, quite theoretical propositions and very practical experiences. And so I feel that we're also always kind of rethinking, reworking, and that's what keeps it, exciting and alive for us. And if we're excited as we go into the classroom, it's because we don't necessarily quite know where this is going either. But that's a great luxury, and it is to do, I think, with what you're saying about the adaptability, the reactivity that the scale of the Institute allows. So we open on to this great breadth of possibility, mobility in the world, but we do it from this kind of quite nimble environment, which means that we can really engage with everybody's individual kind of questions and positions relative to this frame. So just as, again, a couple of other things that I wanted to respond to. So Jenny Lee, I think, referred to the question of learning languages. Leon said that didn't have language abilities. One of the other things that they, or didn't have very many, very high-level Frenchmen on arrival. The program allows you to study French ab initio through to a higher level through classes where you would meet other students, either from our undergraduate programs or from the other graduate programs. So that's an aspect as well, I think, of what you gain from registration. Then also, as Leon was saying, the openness onto the Queen Mary research community, as well as the opportunity to follow taught courses. And you were mentioning the whole question of affect theory and history of the emotions. The Queen Mary has a series of really interesting research centres, one of which is the Centre for the History of the Emotions. Others are around the Centre for Migration Studies, which is a centre with which I've worked a lot. There's some really fascinating work that takes place in the School of English and Drama at Queen Mary as well. So, you are both part of a very small community when you join the Institute, but also part of this very large and international community that we access through Queen Mary. In part, in any case. So at this point, I think as time ticks on, I'd like to really thank Jenny Lee and Leon for their words, for what they've offered, I think, here as kind of their personal experience of this program, and encourage the people online to be putting questions. I can see people typing, I can see questions, so I'm going to start looking at those, and hopefully some of them are going to come through. So I'm going to pop them through. So Julia's asking, are all lessons online now? And at the moment, what we're doing, I hope that Julia can hear me, we are doing all students have the opportunity of joining online. And in fact, one of our students for this year is still in New York, despite the fact she's been wanting to get to Paris since she registered, and she's arriving next week. So she's done all of the program up until now online, but other students, such as Leon was saying, are in the building on a daily basis. And we teach our classes both with a computer terminal and with on site. And I'm actually remembering as well that class that we did, Jenny Lee, as you were saying, which we did from one of the museums before they closed all the museums again. So we did it from the Museum of the History of Immigration, which is an incredible museum with incredible stone fresks, which really need to be seen. So we all met there. It was a very wet day, but it didn't stop us walking around with, I think, just a telephone and doing that class for Jenny Lee in particular, and I think a couple of other people who joined online. And so even the site visits, we've done them in what they call a hybrid mode. Now, let me come back to some of these other questions. Can you see some of the other questions there?
So I think just before we go ahead with the Q&A, we just wanted to let you know that we have an upcoming taster course on the 8th of April. Sorry, I'm looking at the question at the same time. So Anna-Louise, would you like to say a little bit more about the taster course?
Yes, so the taster course is offered by our wonderful colleague from Queen Mary, Hannah Williams, Dr. Hannah Williams, who's an art historian, a specialist of the 18th century and in particular of the salon, which was a hugely important sort of social structure, let's say. We'll give it its sort of conceptual notion, a place of intersection between the monarchy, nobility, and also the bourgeois class. And so Hannah has done a huge amount of work on painting, portraiture, and the salon in the 18th century. But the taster course, in fact, specifically focuses on the Louvre Museum, and it's called Drifting Through the Louvre. And what she does is she takes students in a half an hour presentation through different modes of moving through the space, how one gets to the Louvre, how one moved through the Louvre when it was the site of the salon, and how one drifts through the Louvre today. And I think she takes it right up to Beyoncé and Beyoncé's way of moving through the Louvre. So that is a really interesting kind of immersive experience. Again, despite the fact it's delivered only through your computer screen, I think it will give you a feel for what it is like to drift through the Louvre and to think about how drifting through the Louvre opens up a set of historical questions about modes of interaction, modes of observation, modes of representation, a set of really important questions about how society and our actions within it are organized through space, as well as being just a really fun way of imagining yourself in the Louvre Museum, which currently is shut to everybody. And I cycle past it every day. I look up at these huge, beautiful windows, incredible kind of like snapshots of sculptures through these windows. The lights are all on and there's nobody in there. Okay, so that's the taster course. Rebecca, it's on 8th of April.
Yes, correct. So I've just added the link in the chat. And just to let you know, so this open day is being recorded, and so we will be sending you an email to access this recording, as well as various links to the taster course, events, and so forth. So now I'll let Claire, if you'd like to go ahead and moderate the questions.
Yes, so there are a few questions about fees, funding, which I mean, I think we'll just possibly put the link to the corresponding web page because the information is already there. And then if anyone has any questions, they can email us at contact@ulep.lon.ac.uk, and we can follow up kind of individual circumstances. There was also a practical question that I'll pick up on about the new visa process. So we're in touch with the French embassy, who's kind of putting us in touch with the right person in the French consulate. I mean, we know what documents are being asked. They're essentially the same documents as an American student, an Australian student, students who currently need a visa who have before Brexit needed a visa to come into France. So we know what the documents are. We just would want to have that contact with the French consulates to make sure that the way that we format the documents for the visa applications will be accepted on first application. So we're working through that, and in the next couple of months we'll be emailing kind of detailed information to all the UK applicants. I mean, there'll be plenty of time. I don't think they'll start processing visa applications until 3 months before you want to arrive in France anyway. So that's not something that applicants need to be doing immediately in any case. So another practical question that maybe generally you would like to take about how the part-time option works, and as you're studying part-time, you can share your experience.
Leona and I are both studying part-time and making the most of it because we've both been able to audit classes in addition. So I really wanted personally the part-time option because with my schedule, I wanted to be able to commit to properly writing the essays and giving all my effort into kind of like one class worth of work. And one of the classes I'm taking in addition as an audit is an exiles class, which is a literature-based class. So I kind of felt like I could go through that class possibly twice to make sure that I get the most out of it that I can. The part-time option is with the class that I'm taking, it's on Fridays. And as everyone's mentioned, they're very accommodating, very flexible. I have time constraints in the morning. So in my case, they even pushed the class 30 minutes later just to make sure that I could physically get on campus. So I go to class on Fridays, but then I'm auditing a class on the Thursdays with the internet. So it's a very good way of breaking it down. You can, of course, most of the students are doing it full time, but there's quite a few of us also doing it part time because then you get to extend the experience in Paris. This year we weren't able to go to London, but next year, we should be able to figure that out a little bit. So that way we can also engage in that trip. If you're interested in the part-time option, I highly recommend it. You get a ton out of it, especially extending it into that 2-year basis.
Yeah. So just to answer kind of practically, the program is delivered normally over 2 days of main courses. That's the Thursday and the Friday, unless we have a major kind of revolution in life at the Institute. But for a number of years, we've been delivering the MA program at the end of the week. Anything that's additional, like French classes, might happen earlier in the week, but you can do the MA program only on Thursday and Friday. And generally, it's 2 full days if you're working full time, and kind of a morning and an afternoon, or 2 afternoons if you're doing it part time. That's kind of, so you have during the first term, it's 2 main courses if you're full time, the 2 core courses, and it's 2 option courses in the second term if you're studying, plus the research methodologies course, which is not assessed initially and is, as Jenny Lee said, kind of an exploratory laboratory type course, and then is assessed as you kind of as it gets used as the space for preparing your dissertation. And there's a small level of assessment of that kind of preparatory work towards your dissertation. That gives you some set of sense of the structure of the course.
And just to answer a quick questions about what auditing means, it means attending classes, participating in the class, but you don't get credits for that class. You're not submitting the assessment, you're just participating in the class but not taking it for credit. And there was a question about the structure of the program. So as we're talking about that aspect of it, so the teaching would start at the end of September. It's an 11-week teaching term taking you to mid-December with a reading week in the middle, and then the second teaching semester starts towards the end of January until mid-April. And so that's when you complete the taught elements of the course, and then throughout the summer month you write the dissertation, which is submitted right at the start of September. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Leon, maybe you want to answer the questions relating to accommodation, because you've mentioned that you've kind of lived in a variety of places already. There was questions about costs, where do students live? Is it possible to get short-term accommodation if you're only staying for 1 semester? So if you could cover those questions.
Yeah, of course. So I'd say my kind of epitaph for French accommodation is it's an incredibly vibrant market. Every building has holes in the walls where there's a bed and a stove. There's so many holes where you can live in Paris, and nice apartments too. It's tricky to get your head around it at first. I know it took me a while to get my head around it. There are loads of resources online to do, pap.com. There's so many accommodation websites. I found Airbnb was good because there's, you can just pay and then go. It's a little bit trial and error, but there are loads of single rooms around the city called chambre de bonnes, which are brilliant for a student like me. In terms of price, they're probably between 500 and 750 euros a month. But that's just my experience. There's some more, there's some less. There's, in terms of where people live, I live in the 16th, but I know people that live in the 11th, that live in the 13th, that live in the 6th, all around the city. I know there are, ULIP has some institutional connections with, I forget the name of it now, but like, what's it called? Is
it Institute? Or next
Cité. Cité. So there's other, I think ULIP's document was really helpful for me, the Moving to Paris document, for looking at all these options. It is a little bit trial and error, but I mean, if you want to get in contact, I can help you with the finite stuff, but it is a little bit trial and error. I'll hold my hands up and say that. But I would also say that the adaptability of it meant that I could move between here and there. So to answer the person's question about the 1 semester, I've been in one place for a week, one place for 2 months. The current place I'm in for 9 weeks. So it's not like London where you have a full year's contract. You can kind of move between and kind of tailor it to your situation.
And as they were saying, that where you are living is also, it's part and parcel of the kind of experience that you are also thinking about and kind of conceptualizing and understanding the difference between what it means to say I live in the 16th, but I know people who live in the 11th. That's a really kind of significant statement to make about your kind of social mobility, let's say. I mean, it's so, I think there's something those questions are very that are burning personal questions are also ones that we try to kind of take a step back from and think about as well as ways of understanding the world that we're in. So they're not always just there could be challenges, but they're also intellectual openings, let's say, and I think and political questions as well. And I'm not sure if that helps to say that we're also trying to understand these things that press in on us, like such as needing to find a place to live. But I think it's always good to have that kind of space for working out what we can do, what the world can offer us, and how we negotiate with it.
Anna-Louise, there was a question from Julia, who was asking if we could give more examples of dissertation projects that students have done in the past, and putting you on the spot a little bit, which kind of stand out.
Okay, one that stands out, which was a really wonderful project, which was about the Paris Commune. So one of the most kind of disruptive events of kind of civil war that was about photography of the Commune and the way in which the camera was used as an element, very early usage of the camera as a kind of part of that process. So the way in which the revolutionary subjects of the Commune actually wanted to create a photographic record, and what sort of photographic record they created of themselves. Another project was a completely different project, which was about the superblocks in Barcelona in particular. So that was a project that didn't have anything. I mean, it was, I think, partly conditioned by the experience of the management of transport, green transportation, the use of bikes, the experience of pedestrians in Paris. But the student chose to focus it more on another city, which had perhaps had a much more voluntaristic, much more kind of, active relation to the reshaping of urban experience through the closing off of car circulation. Another project, again, was about the Olympic Games. And it was a comparison between the way in which the legacy of the London Games has been articulated in relation to the Paris Games. So how did Paris kind of choose to position what London did with the Olympic Games as both something that it was going to kind of absorb and do better. So the use of that legacy. So quite an interesting kind of way of framing that question in that respect. So that's, I think, gives you some sense of the range, and I could go on. I'll just finish with one more, which was a really lovely project as well, which was about women bicyclists. I don't know how you say that, biciclista, from the end of the 19th century, but not just. There were women who rode bikes at the end of the 19th century, but mainly there was a really terrible type of a way of caricaturing them. So this idea that women would be getting on a bike was profoundly kind of troubling to the social order. And so it was an object of caricature and ridicule in a number of newspapers of the time. So the student did a really original project, I think, which was based on archival research around those visual representations of these kind of troublesome women who thought it was all right for them to get on a bike as well. And so that was another very well-received project from this past cohort.
Thank you very much. A couple more questions. Ella was asking whether all classes in Paris were taught in English. Yes, unless you're taking the kind of additional French classes, which would be taught in French, or the modules and teaching associated with the MA is in English. Mm-hmm. I think possibly you might suggest some reading in French for those who know French, but there's no requirement for you to know any French at all. And the question about speaking of the additional French classes, they're including there's no additional fee to attend those classes. They're included as part of the package. Okay.
Are you still moderating? I've stopped moderating, Claire.
Yeah, I was.
Sorry.
There was a question. Maybe Jenny could pick this one up, because she was talking earlier about kind of not wanting to be a tourist and kind of wanted the academic structure to kind of get to know the city. Question: how have you found your physical interaction within Paris change as you've progressed through the modules? Do you want to?
One of the biggest one is the enlightenment of looking at things, you know. So before I started the program, I obviously went to the Louvre, I went to Versailles. I'm an equestrian, so I've spent more than 200 hours in the forests, you know, riding around and various things. And in this process, you become so much more aware of the small details. You know, you see a caricature painting or graffiti or a stone wall, because of all the site visits that you're asked to go out and see. One thing that I found really incredible is early on, we had to look out our window and we all discussed about what we saw outside of our own window. And it's a talking point, you know, if anyone has moved, kind of, well, now what's out your window? And it's a new way of looking at the city around you, because you really go into the field and you look at, Leon always talks about verticality. So you're always looking at things from a completely different perspective than just your eye level. You're looking at the stones, and then you realize the meaning of those stones, and you realize if there are cobblestones on this street, that's very poignant, versus that street where they have been paved over because of other functions that they were used for. So as you go through the program and as you go living in Paris, you just are exposed to an entire different way of looking at the construct, the physicality of materialism in the city, but also what it represents. We've looked at numerous paintings of bridges and kind of how you used to have this culture where the bridge was a social element of life. And now that entire culture has almost disappeared. And from the Middle Ages, you know, you had this entire experience of life that just had to do with traversing a bridge. And looking out from ULIP, you have one of the most beautiful bridges, the Pont Alexandre. And then on the other side of you have the Invalides, which was designed by Mansart for Louis XIV, and then across the way you have the Tour Eiffel. You know, so just sitting from the window at the school, at the campus, you have hundreds of years of different elements that you wouldn't have necessarily picked up on. You would have just said, oh, this is a very pretty street, without necessarily connecting all the pieces of how that street came to be.
Thank you very much.
If I could just quickly jump in and say that every class, every week, we've just done exercise and outsiders class, every week, Joanne gives us a site visit to do, and Joanne does it Joanne's interest in drifting, so it's normally a kind of a drift through the city, and the amount of times you do this and then you pop up on a metro somewhere and you suddenly realize you're halfway through one of these drifts or one of these site visits, and it's all these, it's these levels on top of each other of the history of the course itself, and then obviously how one uses the city. And sometimes it's quite disconcerting, sometimes it's incredibly personal, sometimes it's quite emotional, but it is there's layers and layers and layers that you don't quite realize are going to rear their head at you when you are navigating the space.
Thank you. Anna-Louise, do you want to pick up the few questions about application? So deadline, turnaround, and the selection process for the applications.
Yeah, no, so the applications, we run a rolling deadline, so feel free to apply when you want. The one hard deadline is for the fee waiver. So we're going to be posting the link so you can see there's an additional small application that you have to make once you are a placeholder. So the first process is getting a place on the program, and then you can make an application application for a fee waiver. And there is a firm deadline for the fee waiver, which I think, unless I'm wrong, Claire, is the 30th of June.
Right.
30th of June. So beyond that, at that point, we look at the dossiers for the fee waiver and we notify students, and that then is fixed. But we still receive applications from students through the summer, and if we still have space on the program, we're very happy to receive those applications. What we're looking for in applicants is enthusiasm, a project, but you don't need to know what dissertation you want to write, but we want to know that this is that you're bringing your curiosity to this experience. It's, as I think you'll have understood if you've listened to everything we've been saying, and in particular what Jenny Lee and Leon have been saying, it is about having kind of a reflexive relationship to your discovery of the city. So, you know, we can tell you lots of stuff, but you have to find it, you have to go and sort of stop and suddenly say, wow, that's amazing. I never thought about that wall and why it's there. Or isn't it incredible that this road connects with that road and that tells me this, you know? So, you know, you have to have that curiosity. And so that's what I'm looking for when I read the dossiers. So we ask you to submit some prior work. It may not have any relation to urban history. That's fine. You know, that gives me a sense of the sort of intellectual curiosity you're bringing generally. And we ask you to submit a statement of intention. And that can be a very personal statement about what sorts of questions you're asking yourself about the environment you're in now. Again, you don't need to show prior knowledge of the cities that we're going to concentrate on, but we're looking for that kind of spark that's going to say that you want to be out there in these questions as well as in the library reading about them. So there is definitely an application procedure. If we have any questions that we think are worth asking you to be sure that this program is going to work for you, then we just get in touch. It's all done on a very personal level. We're a small team. The program's a small program. We like it that way because it allows us to work well with people, I think. So if we have any questions about your application, you can be confident as well that we'll be in touch, that we'll write to you, that we'll suggest that we have a chat online in advance. So, you know, there's a process I think that's important for you as candidates in producing your application, in choosing the work that you want to submit, in writing that statement. But yeah, it is considered, and then we get back in touch with you. Generally, we try to get back in touch with you at least within 2 weeks, sometimes faster. It just depends on what else is going on. Sometimes there can be a little delay in that process because we may not have received the 2 recommendation letters that we also request from you. So, you know, if you're worried and concerned, you can just drop us a line and we'll let you know if your application is fully complete, if we've had both reference letters from the people that you've requested those from. And roughly how many students at the moment? I think you are 10 in this program. More apply, and this year is a strange year because of the COVID thing. So we have a number of placeholders who chose not to come to relocate. But that's where our range over the years has been somewhere between that and, you know, a little bit more, 15, that sort of number is maybe the sort of size of cohort that we're looking at. And that physical contact hours per week, the formal course that's assessed is 2 times 2. So the 2 core courses are 2 hours of contact time. So 2 core courses or 2 option courses. The research and methodology course is another hour, hour and a half, depending on the day. The French language classes in addition. The but the formal contact time is relatively low in that sense, relatively short, and that's what enables us to deliver the program in quite a compact way, let's say, at the end of the week. I won't ask Jenny Lee and Leon to say how many hours of reading there is on top of the 2 hours of contact time. Essentially, that's how long is a piece of string. You can be reading all the time. You can read, much less for some weeks, and some students do. It's definitely possible to work part-time while you study. We support students in that process. I think it's again part of what makes the mode of being in the city various for them. So there can be some real advantages in working while studying. And we're very happy to hear from you about the plans that you have to do that. You can also, obviously, as Jenny Lee indicates, you can raise a family while you're doing this program too. And I think it's to the benefit of the family as well, often. I hope I've answered the questions. we're going to be wrapping up shortly. I think that's true.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. We hope you found this insightful. And so just as a reminder, we will be sending you an email with some of these links and the recording. So thanks again. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Everybody. Thank you, Rebecca.
Bye.
Thank you, Lady. Thank you, Liam.